Welcome back. Eddie Radosevich, George Stoya here from the Soonerscoop.com studios. Thank you for joining us here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube channel. And bye week's over, George. We covered that on Tuesday when we talked about Brent Venables and some of the players meeting with the media, Dillon Gabriel, Ethan Downs, a whole host of guys as Oklahoma gets ready for Central Florida coming up this weekend.
Going to be fun. I think this UCF team has had a rough go at it. They're going to get some key players back, especially at quarterback. When you talk about John Reese Plumlee, he's a dynamic player, so maybe he can cause some problems for Oklahoma. And then on the Oklahoma side, it's the is it the Texas hangover? I think that's everybody's question. What does Oklahoma look like coming off of the biggest win of the year? And we touched a lot about that on Tuesday, so we won't get too much into that, Eddie. But this is an interesting matchup, I think, because I think going into the season, this was a game that I originally was like, hey, UCF could be a dark horse in this league. They haven't lived up to that yet. They're 0-3 in Big 12 play, but I still think that they're a scrappy team. They're a veteran team, and again, they get their quarterback back, and I wonder how much that might play into the game on Saturday.
Later on in the program, we were joined by Matt Murschel, a beat writer for Central Florida from the Orlando Sentinel. It was good to get a little bit of insight into the Knights program. As you said, George, they're coming in 3-3 on the year, 0-3 in the Big 12. First time that they've lost 3 games in a row since 2015. And I think it obviously starts with Gus Malzahn.
Yeah,
he's won a national championship as a coach before, and I think that when you're talking about the 4 teams that entered the Big 12 and they're going through their first year, whether it be BYU, a Cincinnati team that we've gone up and seen in Cincinnati just a couple weeks ago. It feels like a couple months ago. And then Houston. I think that Central Florida was always kind of pegged as one of those teams that, like, because they have the recruiting grounds down in Florida, and it's a lot like what Matt talks about during the interview. They've gone through the transfer portal. They're going to be dedicated in the transfer portal. Disappointing start, but they do have a bunch of really good athletes and a really good coaching staff.
And I think it's going to take some time for those 4 teams to adjust to playing in the Power 5, but UCF is one of those programs that I think eventually is going to compete for Big 12 championships. Sure. Like you said, they're recruiting hotbed. You keep a guy like Gus Malzahn that's competed in the SEC. He's won a national championship as a coach, working on that Auburn staff with Cam Newton. So I think that this is a group that, look, UCF, it might be a tough year right now, but eventually I think they're going to be a pretty good program. And like Matt said, they've got some talented players. We're going to hear from Brent Venables here in a second. They've got a great rushing attack. They're going to be able to score some points against a lot of Big 12 teams. And that's why I think it's a really good test for Oklahoma coming out of the bye, that they do play kind of a scrappy team, a team that is also coming off of a bye week, feel like they have something to prove. And also you've got some extra motivation there maybe from a couple people on OU side when you talk about Jeff Lebby and Dillon Gabriel, who were both obviously at UCF at one point.
Central Florida, this is just the 6th time that they've been a double-digit underdog. They're 1-4 in those games since 2016, the one win coming against Auburn, actually, in the Peach Bowl back in 2018. I think that they were like a 10.5-point underdog.
Yeah, so they won the national championship. The national championship.
Don't get the commuter schools people started. They are very active on social media, just in terms of Central Florida fans. But, George, this is a game that when you come into Norman as a 19.5-point underdog, you would expect that they're going to throw a lot at Oklahoma defensively.
And Brent talked about that on Tuesday, right? I think he said something like, hey, they run the second most trick plays or deceptive plays in the country. I don't know where you get that statistic.
I asked you, is that a real stat?
I have no idea. I don't know where you find that statistic, but he's not wrong in the sense that they are going to do some different things. You're going to see some different types of plays that try to get OU and that defense out of sorts. And we've seen that throughout the year. SMU tried it, didn't work. I think UCF will try it. Maybe they'll have some success. And it's one of those things, can it change a game, right? Can a flea flicker or a reverse pass, whatever it is, change the momentum in a game? And so Oklahoma's going to have to be really disciplined defensively because Gus Malzahn is a really good offensive mind. He's a guy that has had a lot of success throughout college football in terms of scoring points. And so he's going to come in, and again, coming off a bye week, I wouldn't be shocked if we see some wrinkles from UCF.
No doubt about it. Here is Brent Venables on Tuesday talking about preparing for Gus Malzahn's offense.
As always, that I think a good coach's deception is part of the game, and that's really in any sport. And it was maybe Sun Tzu talked about, in the art of war, talking about, again, deception, as something that is utilized on the battlefield, for football or sport. I think it's always a good thing, both sides of the ball. I think that's a good part of strategy. And, so, yeah, Gus is, and then UCF, our next couple of weeks, both teams, I think they're top 2 or 3 in the country in deceptive plays as far as a percentage of their total number of plays. So, if they run the screen, they're going to run the screen and go. If they run the sprint, they got the sprint throwback. If they, run the stretch, they're going to run the flea flicker. They double pass. They throw back to the quarterback. We had the fumble Ruski. You get the jet, you're going to get the jet pass. All of those things to slow your aggression down and to manipulate you. And we try to work on that every single week as part of our normal, even if they don't do it, challenge our guys that this is going to be part of their game plan. Doesn't mean you're always successful defending those things through the first part of the year. We've had our moments like Cincinnati where we didn't play the screen and go well, and then we've had games like SMU where we defended a lot of trick plays from fumble Ruski to reverse pass to flea flicker, all those things. So, everybody's going to double move you if you're going to play aggressive in coverage. If you're going to run their big, pop pass team, they'll run the pop pass and go. If they run slant, they're going to run slant and go. And just all those kinds of things. If you're going to be aggressive, and that's part of our process too, to try to get our guys to play with discipline, within the schemes.
George, I think this is an interesting game for a number of reasons. And, as you said, they're coming off of a bye week, just as Oklahoma is. But at the end of the day, even despite the 0-3 start to the Big 12 slate, this is a really good offense. 4th nationally, 516 yards per game. I think that they've gone over 600 yards in 5 of their 6 games. And despite the losses, it's a rushing attack that is number 3 nationally, as well as, it's going to be a very, very strong test for Oklahoma up front.
Yeah, and Oklahoma's got to stop the run. I think that's where it starts, right, is you've got to limit what they're doing in the run game. Like Brent said earlier this week, I think they're 3rd nationally in rushing offense. And this defensive line and the linebackers have done a really good job. This Oklahoma defense has been really solid against the run. It's probably where they've been their best this season. So it's one of those things. Can they keep that up against a really good UCF team at running the football? And look, UCF's going to get their yards, right? They're gonna get a lot of yards in this game. It's, can you keep them out of the end zone? Can you keep them from having the big explosive plays that Gus Malzahn offenses are known for? You want to limit those. They've been really good in the red zone this year, right? Oklahoma has. Can you keep that up? Because UCF's going to be able to move the ball at times on Saturday. That's going to happen. Just like some of these other teams on the back half of the schedule, they've got good offenses. So it's a really good test for Oklahoma, and it's really going to start up front for them. I mean, you're going to need guys like an Ethan Downs, a DJ Terry, Isaiah Coe to really plug some of those gaps, and then obviously guys like Danny Stutzman, Jaron Kanek come up and make some plays.
246.3 rushing yards per game. Wow. That only trails Air Force, who literally just, that's all they do is run the football. And then Liberty at 235 a game.
You know what's crazy? You say 246. Oklahoma hasn't even run for 246 in a game this year.
It's crazy. They're going to have their work cut out for them, and that was kind of the talk of Monday night with some of the players, as well on Tuesday with Brent Venables and players after practice. Here they are talking about the Central Florida rushing attack.
Absolutely, extremely mobile dude. You can make a lot of plays on with his legs. Obviously we got to know how to contain the quarterback. I think that's something, looking back, it's been a challenge for us, but we've done so far this year. The D-line, being ready to kind of cage a quarterback like that.
Yeah, just different styles, different, a little more option principles. But the similarities are the run with the RPOs, and then But Coach Malzahn has a depth of experience systematically, and then he's got the right players. He's got explosive playmakers at tailback and at quarterback and, at receiver to help all of it work. Got a veteran offensive line that can move people and open up gaps, and so they know how to put you in conflict and put pressure on you, and you've got to play with great precision and physicality both, and you got to close space quickly because their playmakers can run away from you in a hurry.
Experienced O-line, the running backs are very, very quick. You can squeeze through the gaps. Talented quarterbacks, they're one of the top offenses in the nation. They can threaten us on all ends of the field, so we got to be very sharp. We got to be very disciplined, gap sound, and that's how we're going to win.
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of one of the top, I think, rushing team. So that's big. It's exciting for, especially for linebackers. I love to stop the run. It's gonna be a big challenge for us. They have a great running backs, very explosive players, and we just got to make sure we're keyed in on all the keys. They do a lot of eye candy, so we really got to know what we're looking at, so we don't, adjust, bump too far, and we're ready to fit our gaps.
What are they ranked here? A number 3 rushing offense in college football. So that's the number one thing, and I know you know the answer to that question already, but they've been fantastic. They've protected the quarterback. They're running their system very well. They, whether it's double teams or the zone game, the gap schemes, it's the wildcat. It's protecting the quarterback. They're doing a great job. They've got great cohesion. Their experience shows with the consistency that they're playing at. And if I gave them a compliment, that probably the best one, and that's what coaches want to see, is the consistency. They're not turning guys loose. They know how to target you. They know how to handle the different looks and things of that nature. So they're playing in a very cohesive way.
A interesting, not necessarily interesting compliment. It is a compliment that Brent Venables offers Central Florida offensive line. I was just looking at the PFF numbers. According to PFF stats, Knights offensive line is graded out 86.8 in pass blocking, which is actually 4th best in the country.
Wow. So
they protected the quarterback as well as the rush numbers that we talked about before that clip. So it's going to be a major test defensively for Oklahoma coming out of a bye week. But as we've talked about on, the Tuesday show, we talked about it on the Unofficial 40 on Wednesday. You expect Oklahoma defensively to improve each week. If that's the basis of what it is, and, we were talking to Teddy Lehman a week ago right here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube channel, just in terms of, if this is a basis, if this is a foundation for Brent Venables' defense, I would expect it to improve each week as they get later into the season.
You have to go out and perform this week, right? I mean, look, you're coming off of the biggest win in recent history for Oklahoma and taking a massive step in the right direction for the program. You have to continue that this week. It may not be Texas, right? But this is a scrappy UCF team. I keep using that term because I think they're going to come in with some different stuff. They're going to give maybe Oklahoma some problems early, but how does Oklahoma respond defensively? Are they physical? This is a team that a year ago, Eddie, you'd worry about Oklahoma winning this game. They missed a lot of tackles. They weren't fundamentally sound. They weren't able to set the edge. This is going to be a big test to see if Oklahoma has continued to take those steps, and I think they'll play well. Look, I think UCF, again, will maybe give them some problems early, but I think Oklahoma will settle in. They've got the depth, the competitive depth to rotate a lot of guys in to try and stop that running attack. I also think they can force some turnovers. This UCF team has been prone to turning the ball over. Now, they do have their quarterback back, which, he'll be a lot better, but I do think this is a group that can turn them over, and I also think Brent will come up with some stuff. You mentioned they've been really good in protection. I wouldn't be surprised if Brent comes out with some different blitzes and stuff to maybe get after him.
And you would wonder how Plumlee, just in terms of getting back into the flow of things. I don't know if Oklahoma's necessarily the defense and the way that they've been playing through the first 6 games of the season. I don't know if that's the defense that you want to necessarily make your return, right?
Yeah, and it'll be interesting, too, to see how OU plays him. He's a guy that likes to scramble, get out of the pocket. Like, do you have a spy? Do you have, Canick spying him, McCulloch? What's his role this week at the cheetah position? Do we see more Peyton Bowen? I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how Brent, attacks this type of an offense, because they haven't seen really an offense that does some of the stuff that UCF does.
No doubt about it. Storylines aplenty going into this one. I think that it's pretty obvious out there with Dillon Gabriel leading Oklahoma. He's now in the Heisman Trophy conversation. George, you're probably watching this on Thursday, the game day preview. You have been writing a story this week just in terms of the storyline that is Dillon Gabriel going against his former team alongside a offensive coordinator in Jeff Lebby, who also has connections back to Orlando.
Yeah, it's going to be an awesome story. Check it out Friday at SoonerScoop.com. Talk to a lot of different people. And obviously everybody knows the story, right, of him going to UCF, transferring to Oklahoma. But it's also just about his journey from last year to this year and how much he's grown as a leader, as a player. I mean, we've seen it on the field, right? He's become so much better than he was a year ago. And I don't know if it's so much a talent thing, Eddie, as much as it is he's just more confident.
Yeah.
He's really taken that approach this year. I thought it was interesting talking to a couple people. They said, look, 4.5 years of work, went into that 1 minute and 2 second drive to go beat Texas. And that 1 minute and 2 second drive kind of validated everything that everybody's been talking about him for years that know him well. So I thought that was interesting that, there's been a lot of people that believe in Dillon. I think Dillon's always believed in himself, but now it's kind of coming to fruition in what is his last year of playing college football. And we're seeing that as he is in the Heisman race. And who knows? I don't think he'll win the Heisman, but he's certainly in the conversation, and it definitely helps when that one guy out west isn't playing as well either, Eddie.
Sure, and it is amazing to think about everything that led to this moment, and even including like the Lincoln Riley, Caleb Williams stuff, Brent taking over, going from taking over and being down in San Antonio to, I remember driving back talking to Kerry Murdoch about I don't think Caleb Williams is coming back, and then it's kind of like an oh shit moment of what are you supposed to do now? And you asked Brent Venables about that on Tuesday. And even like the Dillon Gabriel stuff, and then that led to Jeff Lebby, and he's going to be the offense coordinator in Norman.
People forget too, Eddie. I was looking it up because this is why I asked Brent. This is, Caleb Williams announced on January 3rd about 3 p.m. that he was going in the portal.
Right.
4 hours later, Dillon Gabriel announced he was committed to Oklahoma, and so it was one of those situations that, and he was supposed to start school the next day at UCLA.
It was like a 12-hour period where. Yeah. I mean, think about where the quarterback situation at Oklahoma could be. I think everybody saw it a year ago down in the Cotton Bowl. Like, if Dillon Gabriel does enroll in Los Angeles at UCLA, I mean, OU's kind of shit out of luck.
Exactly, and that was kind of the thing. And look, I knew Brent was going to talk about Caleb, and he kind of says that at the top. He's like, I'm not going to talk about players that aren't here. But you're fooling yourself if you didn't think at some point Brent was trying to convince Caleb to stay at Oklahoma. I'm sure. I mean, he knew the type of talent that Caleb was. He also knew the situation Oklahoma was in at quarterback. I mean, they didn't have Spencer Rattler had transferred at that point. It looked like Caleb was going to transfer. They were in a tight spot. And for Dillon to come in, and obviously the reason he's here is Jeff Lebby, but for Dillon to connect with Brent, I think over one FaceTime call and be like, this is going to be our guy moving forward is kind of crazy. Obviously was in a tough spot last year. They didn't have any depth. And now you're seeing this year him kind of play a little bit more free, I think, because they do have a guy in Jackson Arnold behind it.
And certainly could be a guy that ends up in New York City at the end of the season. Here is Brent Venables as well as Dillon Gabriel kind of portraying everything that went down during that time period, and then obviously Dillon ended up in Norman.
Well, when you're 18 taking your first snap, a lot's going through your head, but I think just the whole journey, getting to this point, I think I've learned a lot about myself, learned a lot about playing the position, and then, kind of the external things, There's football, but then there's also, being a quarterback, being a leader, being a great teammate, representing a university or something bigger than yourself. It all comes with the position. So I think just throughout that journey, I've learned a bunch about how I want to, conduct myself.
Just a baller, And, of course, I knew of Dillon Gabriel having been in the Southeast, and there was another quarterback, Mackenzie Milton, that had transferred to Florida State. And so I kind of knew those dynamics of what was going on. Florida State was a big rival. So, and then fan of Josh and Jeff both and their situation there. And so I've always been paying attention, and this Gabriel guy's pretty dang good, And so, and then, of course, we watched his video too. All right, let's just get familiarized, with here's the guys that maybe we're looking at.
Yeah, it was. Being thrown into the fire as well. I think 3 weeks before, my high school was done, I was already in college. So And I say that because I graduated early. But and then starting my freshman year, I think just that all happened really quick. But I learned a lot from those experiences and kind of learned in front of many instead of, on the practice field. So there's benefits and things that aren't so good, but just learn from those experiences and grown. And ultimately, I'm at where I'm at because of those experiences.
And he had to have a lot of trust and faith and belief, and knowing that he had never met me. I FaceTime with him, and hey, brother, here's the situation. I visit with him and his family, and I know you're supposed to be going to college tomorrow, or maybe it was 2 days away, and but here's our situation. And obviously, Jeff's relationship, lend credibility, to some of their conversations and the things that we were laying out there for him. So, next thing you know, he had a few questions, and we answered them as well as we could under the circumstance. Some of it you just didn't know, but I told him I couldn't make any promises about who was going to be here, who wasn't. I was going to try to keep the roster as is, so he'd have to come knowing, that I wasn't going to be misleading and things of that nature. I want him to come here and feel good about his opportunity. And he bet on himself. When it's all said and done, he bet on himself and bet on his relationship with Coach Levy, and it worked out really well for all of us.
Yeah, when we had a leadership meeting, and he said he doesn't want this game to be about him, that he wants it to be about the team, like every game has been. And it takes a lot of humility for a quarterback to say that. Stereotypes for quarterbacks to be egotistic, kind of selfish personality. And Dillon is everything but that. He's a great player, Heisman candidate player, Heisman caliber, and he's got the character to follow up. He's a really humble guy, always about the team and leading well.
Obviously, you guys want to win regardless, but does that kind of make you want to win even more, just to, let him beat his former team?
Just playing for your brothers and another motivation behind it, something else to throw on the fire.
I am. I think it's interesting, how college football, brings it all full circle. But I'm excited for it. I'm excited for every opportunity, and grateful that I get to run out with these guys, and it'll be a great time. I think now I'm just kind of settling in that college football is, what it is, and it's wild. And once you think one thing, it'll turn into a whole nother. So. Just kind of letting it all happen. I would just say this: I'm not surprised with college football how things are going. There could be any matchup. There can be any player on any team. So
it's interesting to me, George, just watching that video back too. The legacy that he now has at Oklahoma and leading that game-winning drive. It's just crazy how the narrative can change, so quickly. And of course, his kind of final chapter, or whatever you want to call it here, over the next 6 games can certainly be written multiple ways. And I mean, if you go on to win a Heisman Trophy or win a national championship or something, that aura or whatever you want to call it, it just gets bigger and bigger. But when you're talking about like legacy, it's like Baker and Kyler and even Jalen Hurts, they all had their own kind of path. His maybe is the most fascinating to me, and not in terms of because he was a walk-on or anything like that, like Baker was, but just how he got here. And at the moment that he did, it was so important to kind of the progress of the program, really.
And we'll look back in several years and be like, Dillon stepping in and coming to Oklahoma, I wouldn't say necessarily saved the program, right? That's probably not the right term, but he certainly helped it.
It feels like he's the right guy at the right time,
yeah,
doesn't it? And it's easy to say that when he's playing well on the football field.
Right, and I think he's taken the right approach, right? Like I think that last year was really tough for him. He's opened up a lot about that in terms of confidence and accepting that type of a role at this type of a school when you think about the history of the quarterbacks here. But then even talking to, his NIL agent that he works with, and he does a really good job in NIL, after the Texas game, his agent went to him and said, hey, do you want to, try and capitalize on this? And Dillon said no. Dillon said, hey, I want to focus on football. We'll deal with NIL later in the year if things keep going the way that they look like they might. But right now he wants to focus on football. He wants to keep it centralized. There's a lot of goals still in front of him that he wants to accomplish, like competing for a Big 12 championship, winning a Big 12 championship, going to the college football playoff, maybe being in New York. all those sorts of things. So I think he's been very focused this year. And not to say he wasn't a year ago, but I think it's just become more centralized and maybe a little bit easier for him as he's settled in.
Oh, and I think everybody knows that, is an Oklahoma fan or just kind of keeps an eye on it in general. Being the quarterback at Oklahoma, you got to have some thick skin, and you also
lots of pressure.
There's a ton of pressure. Every move that you make is going to be scrutinized and put under a magnifying glass by idiots like us. Somebody that did cover Dillon Gabriel was Matt Murschel and with the Orlando Sentinel. Here is our interview with Matt talking about the Knights headed to Oklahoma on Saturday. Welcome in, Matt. Thanks for taking the time to join us. It's I understand it's been a pretty rough couple weeks for Gus Malzahn's program, but I think from the outside looking in, Central Florida coming in 3-3, getting some guys back this week, and obviously coming off of a bye like Oklahoma. This is kind of a week that you can get right going back into what is going to be the second half of the schedule.
Yeah, pretty much, and that's what UCF really needed. They were a banged up group. Obviously, starting quarterback John Rice Plumlee has been out for the last 3 or 4 weeks. They've had injuries on the offensive and defensive lines. They lost one of their starting linebackers. It's just been a rough patch right now. And for Gus Malzahn, he wanted to get these guys back and get them healthy. And it turns out it's going to be beneficial, as he announced on Monday that Plumlee will be back and start this week against Oklahoma. Most of the starters are expected to be back. And he hopes that will give them a huge boost because, again, this is a team that's been battered around over the last 3 or 4 weeks. They've suffered their first 3-game losing streak since 2015, and it's been a struggle in the Big 12. And there's no way to sugarcoat it. They should have beat Baylor a couple weeks ago. They haven't been able to. They didn't do that, and now they're just trying to figure out a way how to get some wins and kind of build some confidence as they move into the second half of the season.
Matt, tell us a little bit about Plumlee because I think coming into the season, he's a guy that a lot of people circled as, hey, he's somebody that could be a difference maker in this league. Obviously, they've missed him. What does he bring to the table? We know he's a guy that can run a little bit, but also just from a leadership standpoint. And also, what exactly, I guess, was his injury? Was it a knee injury? What was going on there?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for Plumlee is leadership. Yep. He's a guy this is his in year 2. His teammates really like him and really want to play for him. He's a very competitive guy. He's a guy that's played a lot of years, and he's also a tremendous athlete. He's a 2-sport athlete. He played baseball last year. Actually played baseball during spring football, which is a pretty incredible sight.
It's a great video.
Most people probably have that video of him running off the baseball diamond and then going to the spring football game. So he's a tremendous athlete. So not have him on the field, I think, was a huge blow. The injury was a knee injury to his right knee. In the end of the Boise State game, he was trying to slide out of bounds. His knee kind of got caught up. A defender kind of flipped him around. They wouldn't say exactly what the injury was, but didn't require surgery. But it did involve there was obviously some seriousness enough that they decided to keep him out. He had something like, I think he said 5 or 6 different types of knee braces. He's been wearing a knee brace now full time just to make sure that they can kind of get it right. And they say he's close to his 100%. And he feels like he's as close to 100% as he's been in a while. So they're hoping they'll be able to, keep him upright and going. That was the concern going into this season, was keeping him upright, because he's a guy that loves to get his head down. He'll smack into a defender. He doesn't like to slide. He's a guy that really wants to kind of run guys over. And the coaching staff has been telling him for the last couple months, you've got to slide. You've got to get out of bounds. You've got to take care of yourself. Obviously, it hasn't happened so far, but they hope that he'll be a little bit more cautious over the next couple weeks.
I'm sure for Gus Malzahn and the rest of the offense is a little bit easier when you can throw him behind an offensive line that has a lot of seniors on the group. Just give us an idea of that Joe Moore Award. I think they were announced as one of the top 25 finalists this past week. Give us an idea of how good they are and then how well that plays into a run game that is really good for Central Florida.
Yeah, it's an experienced group, and one of the things that Gus did in the offseason was he added in several transfers. They brought in a guy, Murschel from Kent State. He was a big addition to them. They had Dillon Gabriel, Lokahi Paola, who's come back. They brought in Bula Schmidt, a guy who played at Fresno State. Drake Metcalf was an experienced player from Stanford. They also got another guy in Caden Kittler who they brought in. He was a recruit. He actually has done pretty well. Amari Kite has come in as well. So this is a group that's had some experience on the offensive line. They've been banged up, unfortunately. They've had some guys that have had to move around a little bit. The center position especially has been one that's kind of been a rotation of guys. So they're hoping to get these guys back. But even that being said, this is still a group that's helped this team become, one of the best rushing teams in the country. They've been able to help, protect the quarterback pretty much as well. And they've got that experience. And I think that's something that Gus has really leaned on. And he knows they're going to have to be able to do that. If they're going to win in the Big 12, they're going to have to run the football. That's what Gus likes to do offensively, schematically. So they need his offensive line to be as good as it can. It's been as deep as it's been. And Gus even said before the season started, they can go 8-9 deep. And it's been the fact over the last couple weeks.
On the other side of the ball, Matt, it seems like it's been a struggle to maybe stop the run. What's going on with this defense right now? Where are some of the weaknesses, and also where are some of the strengths with this group? I know you also said they've had some guys banged up front, maybe at linebacker as well. What do you expect from that group this week?
Yeah, the defensive line is just experienced and deep as the offensive line was, but they've had injuries as well. Ricky Barber, a defensive tackle who really is one of their top tackles. He's been out for the last 2 or 3 weeks, hasn't been able to go. Tremont Morris Brash, an edge rusher, has been great. Josh Salazar has been great. I think the biggest challenge when it comes, especially stopping the run, is that these guys haven't been able to get the kind of penetration that they want to get. They haven't been able to get, be disruptive in the backfield. And some of that is a size issue. I think when you look at the Kansas game 2 weeks ago, you saw Kansas's offensive line was much bigger than UCF's defensive line. And I think they kind of took it to them. And that was an embarrassment a little bit for Gus. I mean, after that game, they felt like, listen, they could be challenging. But, once they get all their guys back and they feel that Barber is going to be back this week, they feel like they have a better opportunity. They're going to do some changes. Gus said on Monday, they're going to change some schematics. They're going to change some personnel. They've got to get more aggressive up front. They've got to be disruptive. They can't let running backs get to the second group, get to the linebacker group, and have to be tackled. They've got to do a better job up front. And then you mentioned linebackers. Jason Johnson's he's the leading tackler the last couple seasons. Walter Yates III was out, with an injury last week. They don't have much depth at position. They've got to be able to step up and make some plays as well, because they can't let teams run all over them like Kansas did and like Kansas State did, because it's hard to come back from that when you're letting teams just kind of pound the ball down your throat.
I was reading something that you wrote in the Orlando Sentinel this past week. It seems like in this 3-game stretch that they've lost, and particularly probably in the 2 bookend games, or I guess the 2 latest games, just as far as the 29-point blown lead against Baylor and then Kansas, tackling has been an issue. I think 31 missed tackles over the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, and that's been a huge thing that they've talked about after games is like, listen, if we make tackles, if we stop guys, at the point of attack, then they're not getting those 2, 3, 4, 5 extra yards. And that's really hurt them, especially against Kansas. When you give up those extra yards, and like I said, you force your linebackers or your secondary to get up and have to make a tackle, that makes things a lot harder for them. So they've got to do a better job of tackling. And Gus said having that off week, they just went basic. They went back old school. He said it was ones versus ones on the practice field. They feel like that's going to help them maybe get a little bit better, get back to basic tackling. Now, again, against an Oklahoma team, that likes to throw the ball a little more than it is running so much to speak. I mean, I think then the challenge comes and you have to be disruptive to the quarterback. So those are things they have to keep in their mind, because they realize that this defense has really been picked on a lot over the last 3 games, and they need to step up if they're going to have a chance to win some of these games.
Matt, I want to ask you about Dillon Gabriel. I think I saw that you got to speak with him maybe this week.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously spent 3 years there at UCF. I don't know if you were there covering the team when Dillon was there, but what's maybe just the feel around that? And I think he has maybe there's still a few teammates that played with him at UCF. Obviously, Gus was there. I think it was Gus's first year was when Dillon got hurt. I mean, what's just the feel, and what's it been like, I guess, watching from a distance as he's now in the Heisman race and having a really good year here for Oklahoma?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually was here when Dillon got here, and I remember when he first arrived, he wasn't supposed to be the guy. If you remember, Brandon Winbush was a transfer from Notre Dame who came in, and Winbush was going to be the guy. And he started the first game of the year, and Dillon came in. I think it was a blowout, so he came in sparingly. But Dillon had impressed coaches so much so early on that you kind of got the feeling that Dillon eventually was going to be the starter. And when Winbush kind of wasn't great, in that first game, all of a sudden Gabriel stepped in, and in week 2 he was a starter. And from then on, he went on to start 25 straight games, and it was pretty incredible to see. And this is a guy that grew basically as the team went. I mean, so he had struggles. There were things that it was a true freshman. He had struggles but he also had some great successes, and he put up some big points. Now that was under Josh Heupel, and then you get to year 3, Gus Malzahn comes in and they start out pretty strongly. He gets that week 3 game against Louisville. I think it's the second to last play of the game. And he goes to heave a Hail Mary and he gets hit and he breaks his clavicle. And he was gone for the rest of the season. And I think you could see kind of the writing on the wall was I don't necessarily feel he felt like he fit well in what Gus Malzahn wanted to do offensively. And that's nothing against Gus, nothing against Dillon. I just think sometimes players and coaches don't mesh as well. And so I think that's why Dillon eventually decided to make the move to move on. And when I spoke to him this morning, it was funny. He said to me, this is like a full circle moment for him. To start out being a true freshman and get that first start and to get to this point. And, it is a full circle moment. And he said, I can't wait to get on the field and I'm looking forward to it. I asked him flat out, were you dreading this moment? I mean, you saw the schedule. Did you think to yourself, man, I don't want to face my former team? But he said, no, actually I'm looking forward to it. He said, I want to see these guys. He wants to, after the game, give them a hug. He wants to celebrate. He has no bad blood, at least publicly does, that when it comes to UCF. There are some UCF fans who kind of, were disgruntled when he left and transferred. But for the most part, players and coaches have told us, they like what he's done. And you see how he's kind of matured and grown as a quarterback. Look what he's done this year. I mean, he's put up some big numbers. The play at the end of the Texas game is a great example of where he's grown a lot. And he's now able to step up and make those kind of plays when he needs to help win games.
Another one of those connections between Oklahoma and Central Florida going into this week is Jeff Lebby, his offensive coordinator. And obviously the relationship between Dillon Gabriel and Jeff Lebby Brent Venables termed it as a father-son relationship. I kind of forgotten, Matt, how mad were UCF fans that Jeff Lebby wasn't named the head coach when Josh Heupel left?
Yeah, there was a lot of people who wanted that, and there were a lot of players who wanted that. They were campaigning publicly on social media to get Jeff Lebby that job, and when it didn't happen, I think there were some people who were like, okay, well, we want this guy because he can continue what they're doing. He wanted the same sort of offense, and then Gus comes in, and again, I mean, it's not a tremendously different offense, but
sure.
Lebby a lot more passes downfield. They were a much more up-tempo team. Gus was somewhat up-tempo, but not nearly as pass-heavy. So there were some players who maybe were a little upset by that. But you saw Lebby kind of then go on, and you can see where that success. What was interesting this week, and I kind of forgot about this, is John Rice Plumlee talked about the fact that he actually played under Lebby. Lebby went to Ole Miss under Lane Kiffin, and he said for a season, he didn't. But by the time Plumlee wasn't playing quarterback, he goes, Lebby was there, so you saw that kind of development. And there was that moment before Venables took the job at Oklahoma that many of us thought Dillon was going to transfer to Ole Miss and was going to go there and play because he felt like he would be reunited with Lebby. When Lebby went to Oklahoma, then obviously that became the situation. But those two have really paired well. And I think a lot of the people, when you look at the UCF system that was under Heupel and everything, they love those days. They love the days of throwing the ball up and down the field, all the tempo things that they were doing. And they saw that success. So there was a little bit of kind of, I won't say anger, but, definitely some people wanted Lebby to be there, especially the players. And I think there was some disappointment afterwards, but you bring in a guy like Gus Malzahn, an established coach, I think people thought, okay, at least they're being serious about what they're trying to do.
Let's talk about Gus Malzahn. I mean, what's just, I guess, the feeling around him right now? Obviously some great success his first couple years. Been a rough year, like you said, injuries, you're in a new conference. I mean, that's going to come with it. But what's just maybe the feeling around Gus and just the program moving forward, especially because it feels like UCF is one of those teams that down the line can compete in the Big 12. You think about the recruiting hotbed in Florida, the success that Malzahn's had throughout his coaching career. I mean, I guess what's just the feeling around the program?
Yeah, I think that, there are a lot of people who are right behind Gus. They realize that, listen, he's done some great things in the first couple of years there. Now, granted, they haven't gone on, they played in the conference title game last year. They didn't win, but they had Plumlee was injured in that game as well. And they've had obviously the issues this year, but you look as a program as a whole. You mentioned recruiting. This is really where he's hit it out of the park. I mean, they've got a top 30 recruiting class. That's the highest they've ever had. A lot of that is because he's out there now talking to kids about, look, we're in the Big 12 and we're going to contend and we're going to compete. And yes, we've had some issues this year, but come with us now and you're going to help us get those issues fixed. And we're going to be able to play against some of these teams. And I think that's been a big selling point for a lot of the recruits. The other thing he did really smartly too was he hit the state of Florida hard and he hit Orlando hard. the last couple, nothing against the last couple of coaching staffs, but they kind of ignored Orlando a little bit. And Orlando's had a really good history of producing some great football players. And Gus said, listen, we're going to put a wall around the city and we're going to keep these kids here because we want them to come play for us. And so he's been able to do that somewhat. And I think also with the state as well. And then the transfer portal. One of the things he did a really great job the last couple of years is he said to players, okay, we may not get you the first time around when you're a high school player, but we're going to get you the second or third time when you're a transfer because we're going to tell you, listen, come back here and you can play closer to home or you can play in a program now that's on a Power 5 and you're going to see us on every major national channel. And so that's worked out well. I mean, he's gotten a lot of transfers from Power 5 schools in the SEC, the Pac-12, the ACC. He's brought some guys in. They believe in the message. And I agree with you. I think this is a program that, yes, this year may not have gone like some people thought, but I think in the future it's a lot closer to being a Power 5 program than maybe some of the other newcomers, just because of the fact that they've got more establishment and they've got a good foundation built with the athletic department and the funding they're getting.
Matt, last one from me, and we'll get you out of here. It seems like this is a little bit of an awkward spot for a Central Florida program that has had so much success over the last couple of years with the 3-3 record, the 0-3 in conference play, and then even the addition of the idea that they're a 19-point underdog coming into Norman. It seems like that's something that has somewhat been embraced by a lot of the players within the Central Florida locker room going into this week.
Yeah, I think what they realize is they got to kind of tune out all the criticism.
Sure.
I mean, at some point you got to get it out of it because at some point you just got to go out and play. And I mean, they understand this is going to be a big challenge this weekend. And I don't think anyone outside the program is thinking this is going to be a UCF win. I mean, for them to win, they would have to do basically everything right, which they could. But I mean, again, it's going to be a challenge. So I think around the program, there's some in the fan base. They're kind of grumbling about it. Personally, myself, when UCF got into this year, I think I had them going either 8-4, 7-5. I thought there were going to be some challenges going to the Big 12. So to me, being 3-3 is not like a big, oh my gosh, look what happened. Yes, the 29-point loss to Baylor was a huge, it was a huge deal for this program. But again, if they can turn some things around in the back end, if they can flip some games, if they can win 3 or 4 more games, they're bowl eligible. They go out and then they recruit again hard again. They get that good recruiting class. And then you come back next year and you're a little stronger than you want to be. So there are some who unrealistically thought that maybe UCF could contend right away. But I think most of us believe that, okay, it's going to take a little time, but this is going to be a growing experience and you're going to learn from it. And let's be honest, guys, they also had a road record. They had to go six road games, and they've traveled basically everywhere across the country. They went to Boise State in week 2, all these trips to Kansas, the last couple of weeks, and now Oklahoma. This is a lot different than what they're used to going through. So they're going to learn from that as well.
You're adding a bunch of travel miles as well, just the personal side of it too, traveling all these places. Matt, have a safe trip out to Oklahoma City/Norman, and we'll catch up with you on Saturday.
Okay, sounds good, guys. Thanks a lot for having me on.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt.
Once again, thank you to Matt for joining us. I had kind of forgotten about the Jeff Lebby stuff.
Yeah.
And how angry, like outright angry, fans were that he didn't get the job. Gus Malzahn gets the job. And I completely, until Matt had mentioned it, had forgotten kind of like the inside the facility, if you will, campaign that the players had put together to try to get Jeff Lebby that job.
And he probably deserved it in some ways, right? Like he was doing a really good job there. I think he's still a future head coach at some point.
For sure.
I think he's going to get a job. I mean, heck, if OU keeps playing as well as they are right now, he might be a head coach next year. That's a discussion for another day. But yeah, I forgot about that. And then also I think it was interesting to hear his perspective on Dillon Gabriel, having covered him when he first got there. Sounds like there's no ill will there. I mean, talking to Dillon this week, there was clearly no ill will, even between him and Gus Malzahn, who was obviously there, Dillon's last year at UCF when he got hurt. So, I think it's one of those things that, I think it worked out for everyone in the end. Jeff Lebby got to come back to Oklahoma where he's always wanted to coach. Dillon Gabriel's playing at a blue blood program, 6-0 in the Heisman conversation. I think that at the end of the day, everybody would say it worked out. And look, I think UCF, I said it to Matt, it's a program that I think can compete for Big 12 titles in the future, and I think Gus Malzahn's a damn good football coach.
Yeah, you can do a lot through the transfer portal. Dillon Gabriel's a great example of that. Oklahoma fans are well aware. Somebody that is going to get a big opportunity coming up on Saturday is, I think, somebody that we feel like is going to start at right guard, correct?
Yeah.
And Caleb Shaffer.
Yeah, he is. I mean, I think. I mean, maybe I'll be wrong, but
I'm there with you. I'm out there on that limb with you. I think he's going to start.
He's definitely going to play. I think there's going to be a rotation there between him. Caden Green, I think, is going to start at left guard. You got Troy Everett that might be thrown in the mix as well. Savion Byrd sounds like he's healthy. I don't know which side he'll play, but those 4 guys are going to get to play. I think Caleb Shaffer is going to start, though. We talked about it, I think, Tuesday, but the way that Brent talked about Caleb at his press conference and just the selflessness of him, accepting a role. I mean, this is a guy that, started 35 games at Miami, Ohio, was an all-MAC type player, was a really good player for them, played a lot of football, comes to Oklahoma and he's a backup, right? Didn't even get to really see a whole lot of playing time until the last 2 drives of OU Texas in the biggest moment of his career, and plays well. And now it sounds like he's really earned an opportunity to go in there and play a little bit more with Matwire out.
There has been one common theme with the number of transfers that Oklahoma has brought in over this past year and a half since Brent Venables has joined the program or taken over the program. It has been they seem to be incredible kids. And I think that Caleb Shaffer, just as you said, George, is another great example of that. Here he is talking with the media on Tuesday night.
Just honestly, once again, I feel like I'll say, Texas, a game at Texas, doesn't really come to the magnitude that a game at Miami did, respectfully, but 4 years of experience, you still got to, put it into perspective. It was 4 years of failing my way to the top, having to learn, mess up, get up and just keep attacking it every day. Coming here at OU, the standard, you can't reach it. They put it so high, you just got to keep coming in here every day and doing everything you can to be your best, and so I feel like being at Miami, they gave me the foundation of just how to show up every day and be a professional and work. Are you going to feel 110% walking into work every day? No, but you got a job to do, that's when discipline kicks in. You're not going to feel motivation to do your job every day, but discipline, is what bridges that gap when, motivation isn't giving you what you need. So I just feel like my journey through college football has just taught me really how to be professional, be disciplined, show up regardless of how I'm feeling, and do what I need to do to help this team be great. Actually, man, I don't even consider it like a smaller role. My job's to help the team, my goal is to come here and get better. When I first got here, I say since I've been at OU, mentally the game of football for me has changed a lot. I had played 4 years, but, I didn't know what I didn't know when I first got to OU. From a football standpoint, I had a lot to learn. Coach B has been great about coaching and bringing me along, and I just feel like Texas was just an opportunity to show, how far I'm coming along, that I'm learning, and that I'm really trying to take advantage of my opportunity.
What's it mean to be voted a team captain this year?
It means a lot, truly. It really kind of caught me off guard, But I was honored just because I really love these guys. I love these coaches, this staff. It means a lot that they look up to me as someone, who really emulates what this program is about. I know I haven't been here a long time, but I really just try and, show how appreciative I am for my opportunity by the way I come in here, prepare on a daily basis, do things the right way. That's my way of trying to show that I care about this team. And once again, the fact that they voted me that means a lot to me. And I just want to keep carrying myself in a professional manner and showing these guys how to do it the right way.
Little George Stoya cameo there.
I need to smile more.
How tall are you?
6'1", 6'1.5".
I mean, taller than me.
If I stand up straight, maybe 6'2" on a good day.
Okay.
He's a big guy, though. I mean,
that's what I'm saying. Like 6'4", 344.
I mean, 344. I mean, the dude is big and physical, and it's going to be interesting to see, does that help the run game? What does that look like for Oklahoma? But the part that stood out to me with him is, man, does that not sound like a Brent Venables guy? Somebody that's bought into the program, right? Somebody that, like I said earlier, had such a big role at Miami, Ohio, right? Like he was a leader on that team, a guy that played a lot of football, very experienced. Comes to Oklahoma, he accepted a backup role. And to him, it's so interesting to hear him say it's not a smaller role to him. He feels like he's still helping the team even if he's not on the football field. And again, that's what Brent's looking for. They got a lot of guys in the transfer portal that's helped them immediately, but they also got guys that are waiting for their opportunity or helping them in practice that maybe we don't see all the time. Or, hey, somebody goes down, they're ready to go. And that's what you want to see from a guy like Caleb Shaffer. Just a joy to talk to. It's so interesting. You said, all these transfers. We were talking last night. There's like 8 or 10 guys that I could convince myself that they should win the media award. And a lot of them, maybe over half of them, are transfers. When you talk about a Walter Rouse, a Rondell Bothroyd, Dasan McCullough, Andrew Anthony before he got hurt, now Caleb Shaffer. I mean, the list goes on and on of these guys that just seem like high character dudes.
He is going to be part of an Oklahoma offensive line unit, George, that is going to have a massive opportunity. And I think that was something that we talked about on Tuesday, just in terms of Oklahoma getting back out onto the field this week, starting that second half of the season they're going to have to run the ball better, and or at least run the ball better than they had in the first 5 games. I know Dillon Gabriel did a lot on the ground with his legs on Saturday or a couple Saturdays ago at the Cotton Bowl. But Central Florida, let's just be honest, they can't stop the run. They're 121st in the country. They're giving up 197 rush yards per game, season high in their last outing against. Did I scare you?
No, I'm good.
Oh, I thought I scared you. I thought I scared you.
Nope.
Season high 399 yards up in Lawrence a couple weeks ago. But you would expect that offensive line group to have a pretty good day on Saturday.
I think this could kickstart the running game. And you and I have talked about it. We've talked about the unofficial 40 a ton. The run game is the one part of Oklahoma's offense that really hasn't gotten going all year. And you know, I don't know if that's an offensive line problem. We talked a lot about running back. We'll see who's the guy this week. Seems to be kind of a rotation. I think Tawi Walker's honestly earned it at this point. But this feels like a week. I don't care who the running back is. Oklahoma should be running close to 300 yards this Saturday, right? They should be able to find something in the run game against this UCF defense. So maybe Caleb Shaffer can help spark that, as well as maybe Caden Green, who's maybe solidified himself at that left guard spot. I think they feel really good about their tackles. Andrew Rames having really good a year at center, but this does feel like a week that, hey, the running game hasn't been there. Maybe this can give them some momentum.
As Matt told us during the interview there, Ricky Barber will be returning on the Central Florida's defensive line. So I don't think he's going to stem the tide. I don't think he's going to be the difference maker in the game, but that is somebody that you have to plan for, as they have had some injuries, as Matt kind of documented. You know how like the national news always ends you on a good note?
Yeah.
You ever notice that? I
They
love it
always
at the
do,
same
don't
time,
they?
but I always kind of wish the worst for him as well. That's just a personal thing. But we're going to do the same with Caleb Shaffer. He was talking about interest in reading, and here's Caleb Shaffer talking about what he is currently reading, as well as a question from George on what he wants to do with his future. We love the guy.
History about the Italian mafia. It's called Five Families, book by So and Rab, about 800 pages, about 400 pages through. So, whenever I get free time, knock out a few pages. But yeah, history. I consider myself a little bit of a history buff. So that's what I'm working on right now when I'm not, preparing for football and everything.
Why the mafia?
I don't know, man. It's funny, obviously. I mean, crime, can be fascinating and whatnot. I think the biggest thing to me, and don't get me wrong, history of trying to glamorize these guys, Al Capone, John Gotti, these type of guys. They weren't the best guys, naturally, but I think to me it's the way, they demanded respect, and on a daily basis, they took what they wanted. And, obviously what they're going for maybe isn't necessarily the dream, but you take that and apply it in a more positive medium, just go after what you want. You can be what you want to be, A lot of these guys grew up in New York as immigrants, didn't have a lot of money, next to nothing, living in the projects, families couldn't provide, They made a decision when they were little, like, my situation's not going to stay like this, I can change my situation. Granted, it wasn't for the best, but I take that lesson on my end, it just reminds me, can be what I want to be, got to take it on a day-by-day basis, can take this thing as far as I want to go.
What do you want to do after football?
It's a great question, man. I don't know. I mean, I have a few things. When I was real little, I wanted to be an author, hence my love for reading. There's a few avenues. I have a degree in sports management with a minor in general business. When I'm done playing ball, maybe being a sports agent would be cool. I feel like I'm a great relationship guy. I'd love to go back to school, get the necessary experience. Who knows, I love watching me some film, maybe an NFL scout, I could watch film, for a while, evaluate guys. But I definitely know whether it's being around the sport of football or just interacting with people, being outside, I just want to find a job that's able to utilize my gifts, relationship building, connecting with others, I don't know, just working towards something bigger than myself. Whatever that involves, I know I'll be a part of.
What a great kid. That was a lot of fun to talk to him on Tuesday night.
I'd love to know what Bill Beatenbow thinks of him reading about the Italian mafia. That seems like something
right up Bill's alley.
Oh yeah, that seems like something that he's like, I want the whole offensive line to read about that. I mean, just the aggressiveness, and I just was funny listening to him say, I like what they did, but not what they, I love what they stood for, but not what they did.
I was going to ask you what your favorite character was on Sopranos. Did you watch The Sopranos?
My dad is a big Sopranos fan, so he would. I don't know anything. I have not watched Sopranos, but I remember when I was a kid, my dad was always watching Sopranos when it was time for me to go to bed, and he's like, "You can't stay up and watch this." Or my mom would say that, and my dad would be like, "Maybe someday." So he'll watch this and be like, "You should watch The Sopranos," but I've never watched it.
I'm kind of like a younger Tony Soprano, if we're being serious. There is a character on Sopranos, and his name was Pussy. That's a fact. All right, that's going to do it for this week. A little game day preview of Central Florida. It's all there. I mean, this is kind of the fun part. You're out of what Nick Anderson called the halftime for the season. With Oklahoma coming out of the bye week, they do play something that Bob Przbillo's talked about. They do play their first two opponents here out of the bye week in Central Florida, and then next week at Kansas. Both of those teams are coming out of bye weeks as well, and then Bedlam's going to be really interesting to start the month of November. But I mean, it's crazy. Like it's hard for me to fathom, as much as we talked about Oklahoma getting to the Cotton Bowl, being 5-1 or 6-0. It's kind of crazy to me that we're having these conversations about Dillon Gabriel in a Heisman Trophy or Danny Stutzman in a Butkus Trophy or a Butkus Award, and then ultimately an Oklahoma team that has positioned themselves to maybe make a run for a national title in Brent Venables' second year.
It feels like we're back in those years of 2015, 2017, 2018, 2019, where they're going on these runs. The difference is this group has a defense that they feel pretty good about, and but they do also have a Heisman quarterback candidate as well. So it's going to be fun, man. Every game means something right down the stretch, whereas I'm sure last year, I've said it a million times, I wasn't here, but I'm sure last year you guys were just end the season, let's get out of here. But this year
we would have been kicked off YouTube by the middle of the season.
But this year, yeah, I know. I'm sure you would have. But this year, it's more like, hey, they could be playing at the end of December, early January, and we would obviously be excited about that. So it would be a lot of fun. I think these next 6 weeks are going to be an interesting roller coaster ride.
Just the third possible 7-0 start for Oklahoma, I believe, going into Saturday if they're able to get through Central Florida. So we will be back on Saturday night, or I guess Saturday afternoon after the game, the instant reaction right here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube channel. You can listen to the unofficial 40 that's already up on all your podcasting platforms, as well as Saturday evening when we're wrapping up everything from an OU Central Florida game day with the Eskridge Lexus postgame podcast. For George Stoy, I'm Eddie Radosevich. We'll talk to you next time.